Welcome to Seeds for Our Future, Conversations and Explorations. Today we'll be talking with my soul sister, Heather Ensworth, PhD. Heather is an internationally known astrologer, clinical psychologist, and shamanic practitioner. For many years, she's facilitated sacred circles for women for healing and spiritual development. Heather is committed to exploring and teaching ancient wisdom and healing practices for our own healing and the healing of the earth. Her most recent book is From Trauma to Freedom, One Woman's Journey. She's written and co-authored 3 other books. You can find monthly astrological information on her YouTube channel, Heather Ensworth, and on her website, risingmoonhealingcenter.com. Welcome, Heather. It's wonderful to have you here to converse about our resilience and spiritual evolution and planting seeds for the future. So I'm excited because you combine shamanic work and astrology and your work with trauma. So it'll be really interesting to hear your perspective on both individual addressing evolution and our collective. So talk to me first about, after your recent book launch, what are the most important seeds you think we need to plant for our spiritual evolution at this point?
That's a great question, Meg, and it's great to be back in connection with you again and to have this conversation with you. I think that, in answering that question, one of the things that I would say is that we need to be aware of the seeds that are already within us. I think this is a really critical time on the planet. And from an astrological perspective, this is a profound time of transformation as we move from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius. And each astrological age is about 2,000 years. But this transition time is even more potent because we're also at the end of a 24,000-year precessional cycle and the beginning of a new one. And this correlates with the Hindu Yuga cycle as well, and their awareness that we're ending the Kali Yuga, the time of ignorance, and coming back into a higher consciousness. So from my perspective, some of what we need to remember is the seeds of higher consciousness are within us. We need to water them and pull in the light and energy that can support us to expand into that higher consciousness, to remember who we truly are as humans and what we're capable of. And then I think we're able to co-create this new world that we're moving into. But if we, stay in that disconnection and forgetting of who we are, then we're not growing those seeds and really blossoming into this new paradigm and new level of consciousness that we're being called into.
So what's your advice to people who this makes sense to, but they're not sure what their seeds are, or they feel like they have a path, but they can't quite get there?
Part of what I've experienced, it's really been amazing doing astrology readings with people from all over the world. And part of what I'm aware of and honored to be witnessing is how many people are waking up. And they know that they sense energetically that we're in a big shift, and they feel that for themselves. And then I think the struggle that we're in is there's a very intense polarization going on the globe right now, where some are caught in the old paradigms and clinging to the old forms and ways of being and afraid to go through the change. But I think the key for those who are awakening and sensing the shift that's happening is, first of all, we need to heal. This is part of why Christina Lee and I put out our book From Trauma to Freedom, is if we are caught in our own individual trauma, and if we're collectively caught in the trauma of the past, then we're not able to move forward into these changes that we're being called into. We tend to get caught in our stories and mired in fear and the pain of the past. And then we tend to reenact that trauma within ourselves or in our interactions with others in a way that blocks us from that evolutionary process. So first of all, we need to heal. We need to face the shadow aspects of ourselves and what we've split off or what we haven't really faced and worked through. And then I think it really allows us to open to the energies of the earth and of the cosmos that are guiding us through this time of change and transformation. I love that, and I'm sure you know this, Meg, that Hopi prophecy about in this time, let go of the shore, go into the river, let the currents of the river carry you. They will take you to where you need to go. So I think the key for all of us is to stop clinging to the past, those patterns or ways of the past that have given us some sense of security, but now are actually holding us back and blocking us from this profound time of transformation that we're in.
Yeah.
If we can work that through and then just be in the energies of this time, the earth and cosmos really are carrying us in those currents of change. Move into the new way of being. We don't have to see the destination or know what we're headed towards individually or collectively. We need to trust in the profound transformational energies that we're in.
Yeah. That's a wonderful way of putting it. And actually, the first third of my book, Seeds for the Future, is about finding heart and flow. Because one of the things in working with the elements so much for so long is that they guide us and can teach us how to be. You know, you're sitting there and all of a sudden the wind blows and it can remind you to let something go. Or when you think about flowing during your day, it helps move through the trigger that just happened from your old trauma and remember what you're trying to do.
Beautiful.
So talk about people's hearts in this, the importance of being in heart, not mind.
Well, I just love that way that you framed that about heart and flow, because my concern is, and part of what I've been passionate about is really understanding more the larger trajectory of our human history. And our current modern understanding of history is distorted. It's not accurate. We as humans have not been on this linear path of evolution across the last 5,000 years. This actually has been, the last 5,000 years has been a time of disconnection and forgetting some of what we knew in more ancient cultures and times. So I think part of healing from this patriarchal period that we've been in the last 5,000 years is coming back into connection with nature. And the earth herself is in a process of healing and transformation right now. So the key is for us to come back into right relationship with her, and then she'll support us moving through the changes. I think the other issue is that we've so idealized the mind, and especially left brain ways of thinking, that we've disconnected from our intuition and from our hearts. And as we come back into our hearts, and I know you know this, the Heart Math Institute has done amazing research on how we're really meant to live from our hearts and let our hearts entrain the rhythms of our brains. And a lot of the heart issues and heart problems that we have in our modern cultures are that we're letting our brains entrain our hearts.
Exactly.
We can come back into our hearts, and I know you know this too. Our hearts can be in attunement with the heartbeat of Mother Earth. And then we're actually in that alpha or theta state that allows us to open to the guidance of Earth and the cosmos. I mean, that the theta state is the energy of a shamanic journey, of creativity, of going into that altered state of consciousness. And then we can be supported in moving into these new ways of being, but we have to come from the heart.
One of my teachers, Americo Ybarra, said years ago, and repeated when I saw him not too many years ago, that you cannot fight with somebody when you're coming from your heart. And it took me a while to really take that in and see how it worked. And it's totally true. Because every time, you know, when there's a trauma trigger or somebody makes you mad or whatever, you're thinking about it. And you're disconnected from your flow, you're disconnected from your heart, you're just all, so even just the practice of being in the heart as a way of perceiving the world changes everything. Like you're saying, it opens you to the earth, but it also changes your whole inner energetics, your whole flow and your feelings. It's much calmer to come from your heart.
Well, and from a neurological and physiological perspective, when we're coming from the heart and we're coming from that place of love or gratitude or joy, we are opening to higher levels of consciousness. And we're then actually activating the parasympathetic nervous system and feeling more calm, feeling more peace. If you're coming from the energy of love, you don't feel anxiety. But when we're caught in anxiety and caught in our minds and caught in the stories of the past or our fears of the future, then it activates our sympathetic nervous system, and then we're in fight or flight. And when you're in that stress state, it actually blocks your frontal cortex. It disconnects you from the attunement of your heart. And then you're in more of a state of reactivity rather than openness or ability to come into connection with yourself or other people in a way that you're in right relationship.
So when a person comes and is in a state of disconnection from the earth, and maybe from their heart, but his sort of being in this culture where we're not supposed to pay attention to our own rhythms or Earth's rhythms or anything. We're supposed to follow the schedule of our corporation, which is totally arbitrary. What are some of the steps you would encourage them to take to come back into that relationship?
Well, again, I think, you know, in terms of reconnecting with nature, we need to allow ourselves to make that a priority, to spend time in nature. And when possible, to be barefoot out in nature. Or one of my shamanic teachers used to teach us to lie face down on the earth, let our hearts connect with the heart of Mother Earth. I mean, that both calms our systems, opens our hearts, allows us to come back into that connection with the earth. And then I think part of it also is really listening to our bodies. When we're in our bodies, then we're connecting to our feelings, connecting to the rhythms of our own bodies and the rhythms. And our bodies are very connected to the rhythms of the earth and sky. We're connected to the rhythms of sunlight and moonlight and the heartbeat of the earth. And when we come back into connection with our bodies, then we begin to feel our own rhythms and our connection to those rhythms. And then we're back in relationship. And I think part of the beauty of that is then we remember we're held by these energies that are much larger than us, held and guided and loved and protected. We're not alone.
Hmm.
But when we're caught in our minds, we can get caught in those fears. And again, thinking about the past, fears about the future, we're no longer in the present. And we're disconnected from the present moment, as well as disconnected from our hearts and from the energies around us.
So, in terms of being held by the stars, lots of people I know who pay attention to astrology seem to take, I think this is a question about trusting yourself and listening to other people's advice. They'll say, oh, so and so said blah 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 about the astrological signs today or this week or something. But it seems like a mental thing, they're just repeating it. So what I'm trying to elicit here is, I have a physical, tangible relationship with the stars that feeds me a lot. But talk about that kind of heart connection to the stars and the astrological and how you weave that together. I'm very curious about that.
Well, that's a great question. I think, when I teach my astrology classes, I talk with them about, we're learning the language of astrology, and that involves, our minds and that learning process. But ultimately, it's about coming back into relationship with the sun, the moon, the planets, the stars.
Mm.
One of the things that I really, truly believe is that the ancient cultures were more right brain dominant, and they had that intuitive, telepathic relationship with each other, with the earth, with the sky, with the stars. We're capable of that if we remember who we are and really come back into the consciousness that we're capable of. So I think, again, it's not about getting caught in the mind, and especially the left brain mind, but it's also crucial to remember that all of the wisdom of the cosmos is within us.
Mm.
We give that authority to anyone else, whether it's an astrologer or a guru or politicians or whoever. We're giving our power away, and we're disconnecting from that capacity that we have within us to connect with the wisdom of the earth and of the sky.
Mm. Yeah, that's beautifully put, that we carry it within us. I know that, but even for me, it's hard to remember that sometimes, like every day. I've been reflecting a lot on how crazy it seems that not just me, but all the energy workers I know have practices to release stuff and to reconnect, and they do those every day regularly, and it has to be done every day, and it can be very frustrating. But I always remind myself that the Dalai Lama gets up at 3 a.m. every day and meditates for 3 hours. And I don't know if you've ever met him, but he has just this amazing, joyful energy. He's laughing all the time. And so I say, well, if somebody like that has to do the practices for that long, it must be something about our human nature. It's part of the ebb and flow, I suppose. We're connected, we're disconnected, we're connected, we're disconnected, and pulling ourselves back into the flow, back into the present, back into the river is like the daily task, I suppose.
Well, one of the themes that we talk a lot about in our book, From Trauma to Freedom, is that the importance of coming back into alignment. And all the shamanic and healing traditions and ancient wisdom traditions talk about that we have to come back into stillness. And when we come back into stillness, then we remember our connection with our soul self. And we disidentify with our personality, with our ego, with all the cacophony of what's going on around us. We come back into the eye of the storm where it's calm and quiet. And then we can reconnect again with that inner knowing, with our soul self, and with the energies of the earth and sky that are guiding us. You know, I love that principle of as above, so below, that everything is energy and everything is interconnected. And when we come into stillness and silence, then we can hear those rhythms and really be guided by those energies that are supporting us in healing and evolving and coming more deeply into love and wisdom.
So one of the things I've been reflecting on a lot is the importance of coherence and the importance of trust in groups that we work with. Maybe starting with our spiritual groups, but trying to bring those qualities of alignment and coherence and trust into everything, because those are based on heart and based on that stillness. And they create a different energy within a group to really allow the individual parts, the people who are in a group, to become much bigger with the group energy. Talk about your experience with that and the groups you teach, or wherever you're seeing that, and what you have to say about it. Because as I'm writing about it, I totally believe this. The spirits tell me you have to talk about this. And yet I look at the world and I get very discouraged.
I know what you're talking about. You know, part of the challenge is so many of our groups, our systems, our companies and corporations are really based on a hierarchical power over model. And the paradigm of the Aquarian age that we're moving into is about power with, empowering each other and being in collaborative, co-creative community where there's an acceptance of diversity and mutual respect and that awareness that we're all part of the oneness. And what I've experienced in, you know, a lot of my work across the years has been in helping facilitate sacred circles, where there really is, again, that sense that as individuals, we're all part of that circle, we're all responsible for that circle. There's no hierarchical dynamic. We each have our piece of the truth and of what we need to share from our heart to be supporting each other or supporting the purpose of that circle. And at the center of the circle is the spirit of the circle. And it's about that alignment with the center, which is that spirit that's brought the group together, is holding the energies of that circle. And as we again come into alignment with that, we step out of that sense of ego and competition with each other and come back into that indigenous understanding of the council format, which is where each person in the circle makes their contribution, speaks their truth, with that realization that each person has a part of the whole mosaic of what's needed for the circle to function at its best and to come from that place of unity and love. But we have to come back into that right relationship with spirit and right relationship with our soul selves within us to come into that right relationship with each other, where it is about mutuality rather than competition or power over.
Do you think that's possible to do in an institution that's based on competition and hierarchy?
Well, I had a really interesting experience many years ago. I was clinical director of an outpatient clinic, you know, as a psychologist. And it was a standard system, the CEO and the the different staff, in their positions in that hierarchical model. And the organization was struggling because it was an outpatient clinic serving underserved populations. So you can imagine it's a setup for burnout for the therapists, for the staff. And when I came into the position, there was a 50% turnover rate every year of half the staff resigning, and we'd have to hire new staff, which is very costly.
Yeah.
Organization, especially an outpatient clinic that's operating on a very limited budget. And so I talked to them about using this council format model and reconfiguring how, as a management team, we were relating to each other. And then I instituted across the 7 different offices of the agency, we would meet in circles, the staff, and share and support each other and really encourage each other. And within a year, it went from a 50% turnover rate to a 90% retention rate. Mm. And I think, for people in the organization who are not spiritually oriented, not familiar with this kind of circle collaborative model, it was profound for them to see the impact that it would have. And, the CEO was like, oh my goodness, this is saving me tens of thousands of dollars every year. Mm. I think, as we can shift into that, people feel the difference, and it's generative. Instead of people feeling disconnected or devalued, they start to feel their sense of active participation in the energy of the organization and feel respected and valued. And then it creates this energy that allows that sense of connectedness to expand.
And of course, then they can give it to the clients and share it with the clients. It affects everything they do, not just within the meeting. That's a beautiful.
Exactly. That was how I actually got the management staff to begin to try to experiment with this, because I said, clearly the staff is stressed and burning out. So if we don't support the staff and help them to feel like they're thriving, they're not going to have the energy to support the clients who are in crisis and struggling. Mm-hmm. We support them, then they have energy to support their clients, and then everybody benefits.
Yeah. Your story reminds me of a story that Myron Oshowski told. He was a psychiatric director of a place similar to what he came in and everything was chaotic. There was a lot of infighting and unhappiness in the staff. And because he was a shamanic practitioner also, he did some work and understood that the building that they worked in had experienced severe trauma prior to the current use of it. So he engaged the staff in some healing of that, some awareness, and then some healing of that, and everything changed. And so that part about the ancestral trauma that affects the collective, and usually you can tell when something is off in a building or a place. I was taking a walk one time and I came to this by the bay, San Francisco Bay. I came to this place and I thought, whoa, what happened here? And this was many years ago. I didn't consider myself that sensitive, but I talked to the woman who'd led the group there, and she said, yeah, there was a massacre at that place.
Wow.
And the energy, there was no buildings there, but the energy was still sitting there. And so and people talk about visiting Civil War battlefields and hearing cries still. I mean, just normal people walking around. So the effect of collective trauma, which comes from racism, systemic casteism, war, genocide, immigration. Yes. Every single family who came here had to leave something behind. People, land, roots, pictures. My great-great-grandmother, came across in a covered wagon, and they had to leave all the pictures behind. So my own grandmother at some point threw away all the family pictures, which was very bizarre. She didn't need to throw them away, but she was carrying that
trauma.
imprint.
Well, if you think about it, the whole foundation of the United States was based on genocide.
Yes.
So I think part of what's happening now for people individually and collectively is we're really we're taking in a lot of intense energies from the sun and from the galactic center these days that is encouraging us to bring to consciousness the wounds that we carry. And so I think a lot of the turbulence that we're seeing with people individually and collectively is those wounds are right at the surface right now. And I think that's part of the turmoil in the United States and a lot of the increased racial tension and violence. It's like we need to face the collective trauma and the wounds that this country was founded on and heal.
So talk more about how you said the energy from the galactic center and the sun are more intense. Talk more about that.
So there's scientific evidence that our solar system is moving through a part of the galaxy where the magnetic fields that shielded us from that energy are thinner. So we're actually taking in more of those energies, the sun and the galactic center, which is, again, a part of the guidance of the cosmos to help us wake up and help with this higher consciousness. And one of my daily practices for years has been an early morning meditation with the sun. And I don't know if you know that.
I do. Yeah, I do that too.
Meditation practice. Well, it used to be that you could gaze at the sun and absorb that love and energy and wisdom of the sun up to an hour after sunrise and an hour before sunset. Now I can't do it beyond 15 minutes after sunrise. It's intense. So I literally see how the color of the sun has changed and the energy of the sun is intensified.
Oh, interesting.
But it's really a part of those energies coming in to help us with this process of healing and transformation.
In the Andes, in the high mountains, people actually swallow the sun at dawn, and you open your mouth and put your tongue out and swallow it. And so I've been doing that for a very long time, and it's a really interesting. It's not a very long practice like yours, but it's a really interesting practice of taking in light and feeding the light within, and remembering that there's light within and all that.
Oh, I love that, because we are light bodies.
Yeah.
And our cells communicate through light. And when we take in the light of the sun and these energies coming from the galactic center, they carry knowledge. They're guiding us. They're reconfiguring our DNA, and they're reconfiguring our consciousness, and they're supporting us in waking up.
I love how clear you are about the support we're getting from all these other beings. It's very, I feel like I should talk to you every day. So remember.
I really, truly am so grateful to be an astrologer, because, I've been on a spiritual journey since I landed on the planet, actually before. But, as a psychologist, as someone, I was very into anthropology and sociology for a period of time. If that was the level at which I was understanding what's going on around me, I would be in a lot of despair about our planet right now. But what's profound about astrology is it speaks to these larger cycles of human history and the cycles of our own individual experience, and is actively guiding us. It's like finally having a GPS system so that we're not operating blindly with what's going on around us.
And it's not just up to us individually. I mean, it's more of that collective energy.
Yeah, it's both and.
So I was similarly influenced by the Andean prophecies. I mean, there's many prophecies, but of the eagle and condor coming together. The eagle is the mind of the north, and the condor is the heart of the south. And the turning over of the world, the Pachacuti, which was connected with the 2012 thing, but it's also, you know, it's reflective of the shift into the Aquarian age. The timelines are slightly different. There's a 56,000 year cycle and a 20, you know, but in the larger spectrum of things, there's all these messages that there's a transition. And so knowing that has been very powerful for me as to help my impetus forward, to not despair, knowing that there was something bigger. And I actually, that's for the last year, my spirit helpers have been telling me almost constantly to get bigger. And they don't use any other words. I mean, it's sort of lame, get bigger, but it's really reflecting on that. What they mean is get outside yourself, expand, be in that larger awareness as much as you can. So
move from 3D to 5D.
One of the spiritual activism practices I've been doing since COVID with a group of people is to meet every week. And we had created this energetic pyramid some years ago. So we go into the pyramid and we explore and we ask questions and we get healing, all kinds of things happen. But in that space, we're more and more being able to come into presence and stillness with each other. So the group is holding and expanding for each one of us. It's so important to everybody that nobody ever wants to miss it. And it's helping us all with our, you know, holding bigger and bigger spaces. So that's made me think about what some people call subtle activism. I like to call spiritual activism. Working with light and energy and spirit to make change in ourselves, in the world, to respond to the transition. Do you want to talk about that?
Oh, that's absolutely beautiful, Meg. I mean, I do believe that the change will come from those of us who are expanding and opening up to those energies, because as we do, then we're seeding that in the collective consciousness. And, you know, if you know that understanding of morphogenic fields that Rupert Sheldrake talked about, you know, it just takes, and the Peruvian shamans talk about this, it will just take a minority of people who've moved into that higher state of consciousness to have the potential to change the consciousness of the collective. Mm-hmm. So as and I think what's beautiful in what you're describing is you're attuning to the energies of sacred geometry, the energies of the earth, of the cosmos. When we come back into alignment with that, then we are able to expand and open to those higher states of consciousness. And then we hold that energy of love and peace and wisdom that then is able to impact the collective consciousness. Because I do think we're in this shift from being identified as third dimensional beings to move through the fourth dimension, to move into the fifth dimension, which is unity consciousness and that expansive higher consciousness of love and interconnectedness and oneness. But the challenge of the fourth dimension is that it's the realm of thought and emotion. And again, if we haven't healed and if we haven't come into resonance with the harmony and the energies of the earth and the cosmos, then we're caught in the fear, the trauma, the cacophony of the collective. And it just can spin us out into even more turmoil.
Mm.
So I think part of the challenge in this time is to not be too caught up with mainstream media, with what's on the internet. The more we get exposed to all of that, the more it activates anxiety and imbalance. So I think the key is to do those practices like you described, individually and collectively, that help us come back into alignment, that help us reconnect with ourselves, with spirit, with the earth, with cosmos. And then we can move into that expansive consciousness of the fifth dimension.
Well, there's a fine balance in that. There's a lot of spiritual people who say, I don't do politics. And that's a kind of, I understand why they don't want to do politics, but that's an extreme. The balance I'm talking about is to have awareness and presence with what is. So I'm aware every day that people are anxious, are losing friendships over their views of COVID or whatever, are becoming more and more separated. I try to be present with that in my heart and not ignore it, but not get caught up in it. So
that's what I'm talking about.
That's the practices that help you come into the presence and alignment, that then you can be present and be witness and keep your heart open enough so that you carry your compassion and your light into every situation that you can. And that's part of spiritual activism to me. And yet it's very, for those of us who were politically active in our lives, of which I was one for many, many years, there's always this little nagging doubt, am I doing anything? So then you get into the question of doing and being.
Well, another way to look at it, Meg, because I've been very involved in political activism for years and environmental activism. And then at some point I realized I'm engaging in the polarization. I'm engaging in the fight. And I remember hearing Thich Nhat Hanh talking about, we can't stop the war in the world if we don't stop the war in our own hearts. And it really impacted me. You know, here was a Vietnamese monk in the midst of the turmoil of the Vietnam War. And then I realized it's not about we have to be careful, like you're saying, to not get caught into some of the new age spirituality, which is just a bypass of what's going on emotionally or what's going on around us in the collective. It's about staying aware of that, but not being identified with it or mired in it, in the struggle with it, but being in that, as you describe it, that place of presence and alignment, so that I think spiritual activism is holding that energy of love and the potential of healing and what we're capable of moving into and co-creating together. Mm-hmm. We all do that inner healing work, heal in relationship with each other, and then can move into new paradigms with each other.
Are you currently doing any spiritual circles that do that kind of stuff?
You know, I've been doing some variations of them online, which is a very different experience. You know, for over 16 years, I was sitting in Sacred Circle and doing that work because I really believed, as we can gather in circles like the circle you're a part of and transform, heal and transform with each other, that will emanate out. Mm-hmm. And, you know, keep resonating out in a way that's changing the collective. But given the parameters of COVID, I haven't been doing that in person, but I am going to try some variation of doing it online starting this fall. Mm.
I've been thinking about it too, but it's felt It felt too exhausting. I don't know what, I do know what that's about. I'm so used to being with people and reading that energy
Yes.
and weaving people in when I can hold it all. And it's much, much harder with Zoom, even though I've found with my clients and with small groups that you forget after a while that you're on Zoom. I mean, you still have to look at the little dot on the screen to act like you're looking at the person. But you can create an energy field even in this context, like we've done with each other, that's very supported and whole.
Yes.
And it's work.
But you know, the other piece that I think is really important as we're moving into the Aquarian age is to realize the technology that that's exploding is associated with Uranus, the ruler of Aquarius. But to me, they're the training wheels. It's not the end point. It's to remember our capacity to psychically connect with each other across the globe, to remember that we can be telepathic. The internet is just reminding us of our capacity to be interconnected. But we need to not, again, get so caught up in idealizing the technology that we forget that it is trying to remind us of what we're capable of with our consciousness.
That's great. You know, years and years and years ago, I read Doris Lessing's Four-Gated City. And at the end of it, everything's fallen apart and people are communicating telepathically. And I thought, oh yeah, that's what we need to do. And it seemed very far-fetched, but of course, ancient cultures did that all the time.
Yes, exactly.
And still do have awarenesses, because when you're really present, you can receive and hear things because your mind isn't running like a freeway to distract you.
And those ancient cultures realized when you work with the energies of nature, with the energies of the cosmos, you also have the capacity for advanced technologies beyond our comprehension today. With sound and light, for healing, for transformation, for moving objects. I really believe that's a lot of how the Great Pyramid was built, was working with the energies of sound and vibration. So
in light in the Andes, sending villages still send bubbles of light to another village, and everybody looks up and feels it. Kind of thing.
Yes.
And there's a place in Machu Picchu that just fascinated me. It has 4 windows, and the Inca priests used to sit there and they would just radiate light out to the mountains and make these connections. So that's really what took me into working with filaments of light. Because if they were doing it, why can't we do it? So exactly. We make filaments of heart connection. We make filaments of connection with Indra's net, with the multiverse. And all of that really supports what we're talking about, gives you more energy to do it. Yes. It's really, I feel lucky that the lockdown gave us kind of more space to do our practices and not be running around, because the expansion that's happened for me has been extraordinary. Being able to have that quiet and presence and connection, and not just, be kind of passive thinking about it.
It's so true. I think that
been true for you too?
Absolutely. And I think it was really remarkable too, with especially those initial months of the lockdown, to see rapidly the earth could heal and some of the damage that we'd done to the environment could be turning around. It really gave us a sense of what's possible if we stop these patterns that we've gotten so caught up in, identified with, individually and collectively.
our local newspaper had a headline about returning to normal the other day, and it made me so angry. I thought, we're not returning to normal. And why is the media promoting an idea that we're ever going to be back where we were? We have an opportunity to not be where we were.
Well, and from an astrological perspective, if you look at the profound Uranus square Saturn energy that we're in, there is no going back in terms of the past. It's just, are we going to open to the energies of the future, or are we going to try to cling to those old paradigms and resist the change?
Well, and that's, for me, that's part of being present, because if we resist the change, if we cling for too long, the earth is going to continue, but humans are not going to continue.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty big impetus to encourage us to make change, even if it doesn't, if it's not very, we don't know the outcome. And you and I have learned to not be attached to the outcome in our shamanic work for years and years and years and years. So we're habituated to that. But for most people, knowing the outcome is like really important. Makes you too nervous if you don't know. But at this point, none of us know. And so I keep coming back to the fact that, well, all I can do is everything I can do to open up to these new energies and try to keep my heart open and be my radiant self, so that that can feed out. And that might not work, but driving my car around isn't going to work for sure.
Oh, but that was
Here's a
beautifully
kind
said.
of stupid example, contrasting example.
But that was beautifully said. I think that's the key, to live from our hearts, to remember that we're beings of light, to be back in alignment with the earth and the sky, and radiate that love and energy. That's profound spiritual activism.
That's a really good summary. I know you have to finish pretty soon. Do you have some last words, some more things that you want to say about anything we've been talking about?
Well, I think just the last thing I would say is to remember that we've been through these cycles before. I really do believe that the shamans, the indigenous shamans, these ancient monuments that have been left for us, like the Great Pyramid from over 10,000 years ago, are encoded with these reminders to us in this time, that this is a time of transformation and transition. Humanity's been through these cycles before. And if we do allow ourselves to wake up and to open and get bigger, as you said, to expand into this higher consciousness, then we can heal and transform with the earth and open to new ways of being beyond our wildest imagination. If we don't, if we resist it, the earth will go through her reset, and our consciousness as soul beings won't be lost, but we will then go through another cycle as humans to work on growing and evolving in our consciousness. But this is an amazing moment that all of us who are here have incarnated to be a part of this new birth, if we allow ourselves to really participate in it.
That I would just want to say one thing about consciousness. For some years, I've been getting messages about carrying consciousness to the fifth world, the context of the fifth world being the Hopi fifth world, the one that follows this one. And so I've been reflecting on, how you do it as part of what we've been talking about. Reflecting on it, I began to remember that Buddhist teachers have for 1,000 years done that. And there's a whole tradition of the tulkus, the child, the 3-year-old who's born in the village, who's the incarnation of some high lama, who knows all the teachings that the lama knew, who recognizes the cup and the tools that the lama had. And so there were, they have ways of quizzing, but these people are identified and carry forth. And so there's a practice that, again, the ancient wisdom, people know how to get as far as they can in their consciousness and hand it over. And I feel like that's part of the job that we're doing right now, is to embed our expansion and heart and radiance as much as we can, so that it can carry forth to whomever follows us into whatever transition happens. And will exist, like you're saying, it's there in the cosmos. It requires connecting with and picking up on.
I think that's beautiful. And I think it's important to also hold that awareness and support others in realizing we're all capable of that.
Mm-hmm.
We all have that capacity to open to that level of consciousness within us, if we let ourselves.
Yeah. Well, beautifully spoken. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. You speak brilliantly, and it's a great gift to be able to have this conversation with you.
Oh, well, thank you, Meg. It's an honor to do this with you. I love our conversations. I think we could talk for hours.
Yes, we could. Well, maybe we should.